If it's Sunday, it's Wrestling Night in America here on pwtorchdailycast.com and on the PW Torch YouTube page. Good Sunday evening for Sunday, June 2nd, 2024. I am Pro Wrestling Torch columnist Greg Parks, and this is Wrestling Night in America. We are here each and every Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, and hopefully you love to be able to put a face to a name. Maybe not, I don't know. But certainly we want your interactions. We want your comments throughout the show. I'll be checking those out as we go. So a little bit different type of interaction here. You can certainly continue to email us. WNIAlivecast@gmail.com. We'll get to some emails today. We'll get to your comments. If you're watching live, we'd love to hear from you. And we're going to talk NXT Battleground because that is the next major show coming up on the pro wrestling calendar. And after all, we here at Wrestling Night in America focus on the major shows in pro wrestling. So to help me break down the NXT Battleground card, pwtorch.com contributor Nate Lindberg, and also, this isn't his first rodeo. He was here Tuesday with PWT Talks NXT. So Nate, glad to have you aboard. I know you talked about the TV on Tuesday. Thank you for being here to talk Battleground this week.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. Thank you very much for having me. I'm loving the new format personally, and it's actually good to be able to see you as I'm talking to you. I'm digging it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'll be honest. I had some reservations myself, but I think this is, we're being dragged kicking and screaming into the year 2024. Some of us, myself included. So I'm very much a creature of habit. So once I get used to something, I prefer that method of communication over anything else. So it's taken me a little while to get used to this, and we're still working on it. So thank you to everybody for joining us, and you can continue to search PW Torch in your podcast app and subscribe to the PW Torch Daily Cast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and most other podcast apps on iPhone and Android. Plus now also find some of the daily casts, including Wrestling Night in America, as well as PWT Talks NXT in video format on YouTube, youtube.com/pwtorch. Again, please leave comments. Even if you're watching this on delay, leave comments below. We'd love to get to those and maybe talk about them the next week. Certainly, Battleground, we're going to be talking about next week. So if you have some comments after the show this week that you want to post on there, hey, we might get to them next week. So, always a pleasure. I just recorded with PW Torch editor Wade Keller a 12-minute hot take segment that'll be appearing on the PW Torch YouTube page as well. Nate will get your thoughts on the topic a little later on. So excited to have this new method of communication with co-hosts as well as with viewers and listeners. So really excited about that. Nate, we are a week away from NXT Battleground. It will be taking place at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. First of all, what do you think of that selection choice? I think it only holds about 300 people, so it'll be almost like a TV taping that they do. But what are your thoughts on that? Obviously, we're seeing this crossover between UFC and WWE. Is this a good choice, or should these events always try to draw paying fans to help make NXT feel big league?
So personally, I kind of would like to see more PLEs, NXT PLEs in a bigger arena. We see it as a TV every week, TV taping, and it's kind of like it's a small arena anyway. Down in Florida where they do the tapings at the Performance Center. So it's always nice, for the bigger shows to get kind of a big arena feel. I'm curious to see how this works with the Apex. I think 500 something like that. In the venue. I'm wondering how it's going to feel. If it's going to feel like it's a small show. I guess it depends on how they shoot it too. They might be able to. WWE's like famous for being able to shoot, take different angles and make it look like there are more people in the building than there are. So there's always that. But at the same time, I also kind of think it is probably beneficial to TKO to use this as kind of a bit of a crossover opportunity using the UFC or Apex Arena with their other, product, WWE. It makes sense, I guess, from a business standpoint. You already have the venue, so I'm sure they're either getting it, at no cost or free. Who knows? I don't know, but so like I said, I think it makes sense from a business perspective, but as a viewer, I feel like it might seem like a smaller show than if it was in, a 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 seat arena. Um, the other thing too, and I don't think this is going to necessarily take place, but something that Bruce on PWT Talks NXT was kind of kicking around the fact that we do have an underground match. I keep getting it confused. We're at Battleground, but then they have underground. Uh, but
They're
we have
not
a
making it easy for us.
No, they're not. But we have the underground match, and we keep kind of talking about, what if they potentially like last minute was like, hey, we have an octagon here. Why don't we step into the octagon? Again, I don't think that would be the case. I think they probably would have announced that beforehand. But that could be a nice little surprise they throw us. Maybe if they had a smaller octagon kind of off to the side or something like that, that could be a decent surprise. But like I said, overall, I'm a little mixed on them using the Apex, but I'm I'm going to kind of be optimistic about it. I think it gives them an opportunity to create uh, to give us a good show in a venue that like I said, they have access to already. Um, I'm just hoping it doesn't seem like it's uh, small.
Yeah, for sure. I was surprised that they decided to go there. I think, to me, if you wanted to go there, I would do like a set of TV tapings there. Maybe tape a couple of weeks of TV there, but I would certainly save the pay-per-views to where you can draw an actual audience. And
Yeah,
NXT, they're not going to be selling out 10,000 seat arenas, but you could certainly get a couple thousand for a pay-per-view like Battleground, unless they're just not confident about being able to do that. I don't know why you would pass up the money that you would make from those ticket sales for synergy, and maybe the overhead is too much. Maybe there's not an arena that they liked where the overhead was worth it. And maybe they didn't feel like that they could come out ahead with ticket sales like that. So, maybe that's a concern, but I would have, if they're going to run there, I would have wanted to do maybe like a TV taping there. Is
yeah.
that feasible, or would that have been just too expensive, do you think?
I mean, honestly, I have no idea in terms of cost, but I think it probably would have made sense, or at least if you did want to do the PLE there, have Battleground there, have a week or two of TV there, kind of promote it, I guess, maybe give us an idea of what it'll look like. Um, I don't know. Like I said, in terms of, I guess maybe it might be kind of expensive now that I think about it, because you probably don't want your performers to be in Las Vegas for 2, 3 weeks, unless you were to tape the events, which I guess would probably make more sense. So you're flying people back and forth and things like that between, where they live and to and Las Vegas. Um, but yeah, I think it would have been kind of nice to see, like, maybe if they wanted to advertise the Apex or something like that, a smaller, either one of the PLE lights, as we like to call them, we're on Wednesday nights, but there's still a named show. Maybe do something like that at the Apex. But Battleground, I mean, I actually went to Battleground last year. It was up here I'm in New Hampshire, but it was in Massachusetts. And that, if I'm not
Are you
mistaken,
sure
is a
you're in New Hampshire? Because that background makes me think you're in space somewhere, Nate.
I I am in space. I'm not really in New England whatsoever.
I won't say anymore. I won't say anymore.
Um, but I mean, so the Lowell Songus Arena is where it was, and I don't remember the exact capacity offhand, but I want to say it's in the ballpark of 5 to 7,000. Um, and it was pretty full. It was a pretty packed arena. There were certainly empty seats and things, if my memory, actually serves me for once. Um, but I think they could have found a place where they could have sold out, or at least got a packed arena. Uh, I don't know. It's an interesting choice. It's certainly an interesting choice.
Before we get into the card, one more thing I wanted to talk about, and I know you guys talked about this on PWT Talks NXT Tuesday. Very newsworthy edition of NXT television this past week. We had Jordan Grace coming out and challenging Roxanne Perez for the NXT Women's Championship, which we'll get to later on. But we also had the debut of All Ego Ethan Page taking out Trick Williams at the end of the show. So some new faces. This is making NXT, I think, maybe a little hotter by having this crossover being done in NXT and not on the main roster with Jordan Grace, and also having somebody who fans of both WWE and AEW have seen in AEW occasionally in prominent positions now being brought to NXT. So just real quick, because I know you talked about it on Tuesday's show, but your thoughts on Ethan Page and Jordan Grace's appearance on NXT this week?
I'm loving this. Like I'm not a huge TNA fan or watcher. I mean I've probably watched God maybe a dozen episodes of TNA and or Impact like in my life. I've obviously gotten clips on YouTube and things like that, but it's not been a product that I've necessarily followed. However, I love the fact that there's now this opportunity to collaborate with other companies, other entities. WWE has always been in this silo where if it doesn't happen in WWE, it doesn't exist. But now, I mean, just even on commentary, that this past week they were talking about Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows being in New Japan. I think they even said New Japan by name, if I'm remembering correctly. Which we don't see that, we don't ever really hear that. So now the fact that we have the TNA Knockouts champion coming into WWE challenging the NXT Women's Champion, that's not something I really thought I would ever see. If you told me a week or two ago, that this was going to be our match for Battleground, I probably, I don't know, I might have laughed at you. I don't know. But eh, I think it opens up a lot of doors, and not that I want to use the term forbidden door. I wasn't going there, but I think it opens up a lot of doors for performers to to come back. I noticed, in our chat, Malcolm Baker, who do you guys see from WWE maybe going to TNA? I think, something like Chelsea Green. Chelsea Green had a decent run in Impact. We might wind up seeing something like that. I know I just brought up, the Good Brothers. We may see them like jump over to TNA. Um, I think Chelsea Green. It was a name that I've heard kind of floating around right now, but I think that makes the most sense for crossover. Um, but to see contracted, or at least a contracted Ethan Page, not being a contracted TNA wrestler, but to see a contracted wrestler in a singles match, not the Royal Rumble or any sort of a gimmick match like that. I think is really cool. We're going to see her again. We're actually going to see her for the first time in a singles match against Steve. Why do I want to say? I wanted to say Stevie Nicks, but I know that's not right. Stevie Turner. We're going to see Stevie Turner in a singles match with Jordan
They
Grace.
dropped the gimmick with her. Like, it wasn't she like this? I don't know if it was
Yeah,
video games or whatever like that,
it was
but
kind of like
when
a
she,
hacker.
yeah,
Yeah.
is that gimmick dropped? Like, I didn't see any kind of hint of that when she was on TV this week.
So from it apparently was dropped on Level Up, and they kind of just haven't. And I'll be honest,
I can't keep up with all this, Nate. I
I
cannot do
know,
it.
I know. I mean, I have enough trouble keeping up with Raw, SmackDown, and NXT, like just with my life in general. So, like this, be honest, I haven't even watched Raw and SmackDown this week. My life got so crazy. I've kept up with it, and I kind of know what happened, um, but yeah, I think it, like I said, I think it happened on Level Up from what Bruce and I were talking about the other day on PWT Talks NXT. It seems like they dropped the kind of the hacker gimmick. I'm not sure exactly where they're going with her, because like it when she showed up this past Tuesday, kind of talking to Ava and Mr. Stone backstage, it was almost like she's demanding a title shot. So it's like, I don't know. We hear that all the time. What are you doing with Stevie Turner? I really liked. I thought the hacker gimmick might have had some, or no, not a hacker gimmick. It was a streamer gimmick. Streamer gimmick.
That's a very important distinction to make, Nate.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure everybody listening would maybe get that distinction, but I was going to say that NXT had gone 0 for 2 in hacker gimmicks with Sami Callihan and Stevie Turner. So I'm glad you made that distinction.
Yes. Yes. Actually, it was something I don't know if we mentioned it on air or not. I think it might have been in our we've got Bruce Kelly and I have a little Twitter chat going on. But we were talking about oh God, what was his name? Sami Callahan in WWE. Solomon Crow, and Stevie Turner having a little like tag team or something if they brought him back. But I can't see that happening.
No, yeah, I'm really interested. I know we posted the comment from Steve about Joe Hendry perhaps uh, suggesting coming to NXT, but I'd love to hear in the comments. What do you guys think? Who from WWE or NXT should go to TNA in this seeming talent exchange? And who else in TNA would you like to see appear in NXT or WWE main roster? So, Steve also throwing out Wes Lee. I know
I
there
like that.
was somebody, the Rascals, a reunion. The other two members are in TNA right now. I know there was somebody, I'm not sure which one of them was on social media, kind of basically begging for that reunion. So there's that too. Azan, maybe chase you as TNA Tag Team Champions. Who knows? I think there's the temptation. I mean, you connected the dots, Nate, with Chelsea Green having that history in TNA, and I think that's probably the first inclination is to send somebody over who's already been in TNA, is recognizable to their fans. But I think the intrigue about this is more about who hasn't been in TNA before. Who can you
Yeah.
send over there that would really be newsworthy and for a short period of time? I'm sure it's not going to be somebody that goes over there for 6 months, but for a short period of time, maybe can I'm telling myself internally, don't say make an impact, but who can do something of substance on that show. So I can see the argument both ways on that.
Yeah, I like, because I'm kind of thinking about it too. Like, because right now, as far as I'm aware, this is an NXT and TNA type of collaboration. Obviously, NXT is WWE, but it would be kind of cool to see, maybe some main roster stars go over to Impact, like Naomi. Be would be cool. Trick Williams, like as NXT champ. I mean, they're doing something with the women. It'd be cool maybe if Trick Williams showed up with his title on Impact rather.
Mhm.
Um, there's so many different ways that they could go with this, and it's exciting, and it actually makes me want to tune into TNA. Like I think when it's actually live, I, I play D&D a lot. I think I have a D&D game going on, but I'll throw it on my DVR and watch it another
Mhm.
time. Because it's
I watch it at the gym. I get on the bike.
yeah.
And that's where I catch up on TNA. Like I literally have to take every available moment in my life to make sure I am caught up on wrestling for this show, for the column, for whenever Wade calls upon me to co-host something. So even at the gym, no peace and quiet there. I am on my phone, headphones in, catching up on TNA Impact every week.
That's some
It's quite the
dedication.
life.
It's dedication.
It's I've that's a nice way of putting it. I'm not sure. I think it's more obsessive than anything else, but I appreciate the kind words. Again, if you're watching live or if you're watching this later on, you can always email us, wnialivecast@gmail.com. We cover the big shows in pro wrestling here on Wrestling Night in America. So if you're watching Battleground next week, I'm not sure if we're going to do a post show, if we're going to do our usual time at 8 p.m. Eastern, but certainly, if you're watching any TV, Raw, SmackDown, AEW, TNA, who knows? Because I'll be caught up by the time the show rolls around each week. You can email us any questions you have related to any of those TV episodes and how they affect the big shows, the pay-per-views, the PLEs that are coming up. So, Nate, let's get into NXT Battleground next weekend. The first match we'll talk about is the NXT Women's North American title. It was just announced they are going to crown the first ever champion at Battleground. It's going to be Sol Ruka. It's going to be Lash Legend, Fallon Henley, Jada Parker, Michin, and Kalani Jordan in a ladder match for the NXT Women's North American Championship. So you can see they've got a lot of very athletic women in this match, but they've also got a lot of women in this match that are very, very green. And putting that level of experience in a ladder match, is that concerning at all to you? Or is it the fact that they will probably practice this match beforehand? Does that make it a little better for you?
I I feel like they have a lot to live up to considering how awesome the original NXT North American men's championship ladder match was. Um, it's a match I know on PWT NXT that comes up a lot. We talk about. So I think they have a lot to live up to there. I'd be very surprised if they weren't going to, if they didn't do a lot of preparation and rehearsing for the match. Sure, the fact that there is a lot of people, or a lot of the women in the match are a little green. It is a little concerning. However, I think I think this is really big really for not I mean all of the women involved. And I think they should be able to pull it off, pretty well. This is the match I'm actually looking forward to the most on Battleground. Um, because there's a few different ways that like I feel like they could go. I can make a case for Sol Ruka. I think the biggest case is probably for Fallon Henley. I think Fallon Henley's probably. I'd love to see her walk away as the new champion. Um, but I mean, I can make like I said, make a case for Fallon Henley, Sol Ruka. I'm trying to. Uh, yeah, there was one other in the match too, and I'm trying to pull up a thing right now so I remember who the hell's actually in the match. Um, but yeah, like I said, I think this is actually going to be probably my match of the night, at least the one I'm looking forward to the most. Um, and I f- I feel like in the Apex Arena too, they're probably going to try and put a little extra, for lack of a better term, stank on it. My guess is they may open the night with this show, or with this match rather. So kind of give us a high octane, high energy match. With the ladders and all that car crash type stuff, to get everybody like really kind of hyped and into the show. So um, yeah, I think, like I said, I think I'm looking forward to this the most. And as to the original question, I'm a little concerned about the experience level of everybody in the match, but at the same time, I've seen nothing but good things out of everybody in the match. So I'm pretty confident it should be a banger.
I showed a couple comments while you're talking. Azan says it's Fallon time, so I think he agrees that Fallon Henley's going to be the winner of this. And Steve says Mia Yim Michin is being trusted big time. She's uh, by far and away the most veteran of that group, and I do think there's going to be a lot of pressure in her, maybe even that she puts on herself to make sure everything goes according to plan. She's going to be the ring general in that match, and that's very hard to do when you have, six people in that match and there's nobody else with your level of experience even close to it in that match.
No.
So is that a lot of pressure to put on one person, or would you like to have seen someone else in there, if nothing else, than to help direct traffic in that match?
Yeah, to be honest, I hadn't really thought about it, but I think maybe if they because I like the six women that they have in the match. So it's like I don't want to necessarily like replace like Jada Parker or Kalani Jordan or something like that. But Natalia Natty, she's been down in NXT quite a bit recently. And I don't know. I kind of thought she may wind up weaseling her way into this match as maybe a seventh person or something like that. Didn't happen, but she would have been clearly somebody that would have been able to direct traffic in the match along with it's still weird calling her Meechin. She's always Mia Yim in my head. But the two of them kind of directing traffic. Lash Legend, when she originally debuted, I was not super impressed at all between the gimmick as well as her in-ring ability. However, I can't believe the progression that she's had over the last year. Now, obviously,
Yeah.
she doesn't have the history and the experience that Mia Yim does, but she's improved quite a bit in the ring, and I think that or the fact that like there was a match a while back where Lyra Valkyria had an opponent, and I forget who it was off the top of my head right now, but the opponent ended up getting legit injured like minutes before the match. And they threw Lash Legend out there in an impromptu match for the women's title. This is when Lyra still had the NXT women's title. And I feel like for them to put Lash in that position within minutes, like I mean, maybe it was she was just still the one backstage that had a ring gear on. I don't know. But the fact that they put her out in that match, I think speaks volumes of what they think of her ability backstage. And I think she could be somebody in that match too that it's not directing traffic, if you will, but could certainly could certainly help direct traffic, if you will.
I got a couple comments that it was Shotzi who was injured beforehand. See, this is why
Shotzi, that's right.
I love this format. We can be corrected in real time, and
Yes.
so fantastic stuff. One more thing about this match, Nate, is we've seen in these multi-women and multi-man matches, we saw it with the Iron Survivor Challenge the first time. I think it was Kiana James who really opened a lot of people's eyes with a standout performance. And having all of these inexperienced women in this match really allows for at least one of them to come away having opened someone's eyes, whether it's a viewer, whether it's fans, whether it's people in management. Is there anyone in this match who you want to point out right now, maybe make a prediction about who could come out of this match with people saying, wow, I know she's inexperienced. I know she has a lot of athleticism, but she really put it all together in that match.
For me, I think that's probably going to be well, it's going to be one of two. I'm going to say Sol Ruka first, but also Kalani Jordan. And for kind of similar reasons, but Sol Ruka, with her background and everything, I'm eh, she has just such an amazing move set. She's been off TV for a while. Great. I mean, she's had a few matches back. Obviously, in order to get into this match, she had to win a few. Um, but I think given her move set, um, I think she might be able to do something cool off the ladders, like hit her finish off the ladder or something like that, which people might be like, "Whoa, that was cool." And Kalani Jordan too, for how inexperienced she is, she has it. I feel like she understands what she needs to do when she's in the ring. I don't know if she necessarily understands her character yet, but I also don't think they've necessarily given her a character yet, other than just smiling Kalani Jordan. Um, but yeah, I think those two have a lot of potential. Azan mentioned in the chat right now, Jada Parker. I think she certainly has some potential as well. Really, I can't say anything negative really about anybody in this match. Like everybody in the match has been impressing me, as well as everybody on PWT Talks NXT, quite a bit lately. Even down to like I said, Jada Parker. I think she's the newest person to the roster, unless you count Meechin, who's jumped from main roster to NXT. But Jada Parker being kind of the newest addition to the roster, she's been incredible in the ring lately. So I think I think really the three of them have the kind of that it could have the rocket strapped to them, if you will, after this, even if they don't come close to winning.
Yeah, my inclination is to say Sol Ruka. I know she's still really raw, probably behind a lot of the other women. She had that long injury that she was out with, but there's something about her that I've been impressed with. The way she carries herself in the ring. Again, she's still got a long way to go, but this is the type of match I feel like where her athleticism can be accentuated, and she can really maybe take that next step and be someone who she puts her foot down and tells NXT management by her performance here that she is someone that can be trusted with a bigger role in NXT. So if I had to, I feel like I have to answer this because I gave the question to you, so it wouldn't be fair if I didn't throw my 2 cents in there and put myself on the line here. But I guess I would say Sol Ruka. She's someone who I think has the potential to really stand out in a match of this nature. Everything good? Okay. All right, let's move on.
Sometime, sometimes for
No, go
some
ahead.
reason, sometimes for some reason, I'll hit the mute button. I've got a little red mute button on the boom mic here on my headset, and some reason I'll hit the mute button, and then it never unmutes, and I got to go into my system settings and make it unmute. It's annoying as hell. Don't know why it happens, but that just happened.
The perils of live video. I mean, we get to
Yes,
see all of that. We get to see the panicked look in your eyes
right.
as you're trying to figure out what's going on. Uh, we'll go to the next match here. It's for the men's North American Championship in NXT. It's the champion Obafemi taking on Wesley and Joe Coffey in a triple threat match. Again, for the NXT Men's North American Championship. Uh, Obafemi, is a guy who they put the title on very quickly, more quickly than I think NXT booking historically does. How do you think he's done so far as champion?
Personally, I'm really loving the Obafemi run. Obviously, he hasn't. I think he's in one title defense, if I'm remembering correctly offhand. Um, but I, uh, that man he just oozes charisma. That first and foremost. But if he's super imposing, really, I mean, kind of scary looking dude. If you're standing opposite in the ring with him, um, I, he's got his move set down. I obviously a little ways to go in the ring, but so far I'm really enjoying what they're doing with him, and kind of how they're building him to be this just kind of like unbeatable monster right now. Yeah, I have a feeling that he's probably going to wind up going over here. I could certainly see Gallus getting themselves involved in a no disqualification triple threat match to try and help their buddy Joe Coffey out. Um, but yeah, like that's kind of what I'm expecting. I feel like Wesley's probably going to be doing that fighting from underneath type of thing. Trying to win his title back. Because I mean, it's a title. I think he's the longest reigning North American champion. Again, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's the longest reigning champion. And I feel like when he was the champ, he really made that belt mean something. Not that it never really did. I feel like that belt has always been kind of important and mostly well protected. But there's something about Wesley's run that really just made it important and mean something. So to kind of watch him fight from underneath, take down the big man Obafemi, try and deflect Gallus and their attacks because Wolfgang and um, uh, the other coffee. Wow, Matt Coffee. Is it Matt Coffee? Now I'm
Mark?
gonna Mark. I knew it was an M. I was right. I did that on PWT Talks NXT this past week too. I almost called him Matt, and I'm like, I know that's wrong. Um, I have a feeling, like I said, that they're going to show up and try to help Joe out. So watching Wesley kind of thwart everybody off, I think is going to be a fun, chase for them to watch. But I think when it's all said and done, Obafemi's still going to be standing tall. Um, like Bruce and I were saying the other night, Obafemi could be North American champion until he just doesn't want to be anymore. And we're totally fine with that.
Sometimes a triple threat is a way to get to a one-on-one match eventually. And so, looking at this triple threat, does it seem more likely that coming out of this you would see Obafemi versus Wesley or Obafemi versus Joe Coffey?
I'm thinking if we do wind up going to a singles after this, it's probably going to be Oba and Wesley. Oba is I feel like he hasn't really been defined as a face or a heel. He's kind of in that tween or in between right now. I think he could easily go one way or the other, but I feel like he kind of leans a little bit more heel, and I think the character would lend itself to being heel a little bit more. So I think that makes sense right off the bat. Wesley and Obafemi. Also, kind of what I was just talking about with Wesley's history of in the title. Um, I feel like he'd kind of figure out a way to get that match. Whether it be going to Ava and talking to her about it or what have you. Um, Joe Coffey, it seems like he kind of wants he came in wanting the North American title, but I feel like he might wind up trying to go for the NXT title. Where they weren't the ones obviously that attacked Noam Dar, but they were for a while anyway. It was insinuated that they were the ones. So I'm kind of wondering if Joe Coffey after this match, Joe Coffey kind of gets involved with Ethan Page, Trick Williams, in some sort of a uh, maybe not another triple threat, but some sort of a chase for the title before the next pay per view or PLE, as I should say.
There you go. We accept either versions of that on Wrestling Night in America. I'll be honest, Gallus doesn't really do anything for me. So I was kind of disappointed.
Okay.
Wesley comes back, makes this triumphant return, gets stuck now in a triple threat against Obafemi. I would love to see Wesley get a one-on-one match against Obafemi so he can do exactly what you talked about, be the fighting babyface, fight from underneath against this bigger, more powerful wrestler. I don't know if it'll play out like this given the triple threat rules and given, as you said, the likelihood of the rest of Gallus interfering on behalf of Joe Coffey. So my hope is that this eventually leads to Wesley versus Obafemi because I do think that could be a big time match. That could be, not going to main event a PLE or anything like that, but I think that could be a major draw on a PLE down the line.
I don't disagree with that whatsoever.
Mhm.
Just the size difference. I mean, you get your classic David versus Goliath match, but size difference. But then Wesley just wrestling circles around, and I don't mean this to any disrespect to Obafemi, but just wrestling circles around him because he's so much quicker and agile. Again, not that Obafemi isn't; he's super agile for a man his size, but I really do. I am looking forward to that singles match if that singles match happens. For me, Gallus, I w- I loved Gallus in NXT UK, and even when they first jumped to NXT after NXT UK kind of went by the wayside, I thought they were booked pretty strong. They seemed like a powerhouse of a team, but man, they just got defined down more and more before they went away for a little while. With their suspension in story anyway. I don't remember if it was an injury or whatnot that actually kept them off TV. Assuming probably, but but yeah, at this point now, unless they do something to really make Gallus feel like a big deal, for me, I'm kind of in the same boat. They just don't really do it for me right now.
In the comments, Azan says, "How long before Obafemi is on Raw or SmackDown?" I he's on the right track. He's gonna be there at some point, but he's still got a long way to go in some respects. And I look at a guy like Braun Breaker, who I mean, we had been talking, Nate, on Wrestling Night in America for a year and a half about his main roster prospects before he was eventually called up. So
Same.
sometimes it's not even when that wrestler is ready. Sometimes there's got to be a spot for you on the main roster. There's got to be creative in place for you on the main roster. There's got to be all these other things have to line up. So, we talk about Obafemi maybe not being ready for the main roster, but even when he is, we've seen it could be up to a year or more wait for something to open up on the main roster. So I don't think that's going to be coming anytime soon.
No, I'd be very surprised if it did. For all of the reasons that you just said. I mean, I think in 6 months from now he could probably be ready to go up. Uh, but I personally, I would like to see him down in NXT, hone the character a little bit more, and kind of, and obviously hone his skills a bit more. The longer he's down developmental, the better he's going to be. Logic dictates anyway. Um, but but yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a little while before we see that. And I'm okay with that. I don't want to see people get hot shot right up to the main roster from NXT if they're not ready. We've seen what's happened in the past with that, and it never turns out good. Um, Obafemi is somebody that like I'm wicked high on him right now. As is Bruce, as is Kelly. Um, he's eh, he has that even though he's not nearly the size of Omos, for example, right? he has that same type of a presence. I said this on pwtorch NXT this past week. Like, if I happen to get in the ring and Obafemi and Omos are standing there, now I'm going to be intimidated by both of them. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like I might be more afraid of Obafemi just with how intense he can get. Um, so I'm looking forward to when he does actually debut on the main roster, but I don't see it happening anytime, probably not in 2024. Let's put it that way.
The next match we'll talk about is Shayna Baszler versus Lola Vice, NXT Underground match. Nate, I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on the NXT Underground as a concept being used in developmental. This is, of course, borrowed from Shane McMahon Presents Raw Underground, the
Yes.
old Raw gimmick that was used for a very short time there. What have you thought of how NXT has utilized it? The wrestlers they've chosen, the frequency with which they've used it. Is it a thumbs up or thumbs down concept to be used on NXT?
So I am now going to give it a thumbs up. If you asked me this before, probably even before Lola Vice's first underground match, I maybe would have given it a thumbs in the middle to a thumbs down. Um, I did not really. I thought so with the Raw Underground back in the day. I think even pre-COVID, if I'm not mistaken, might have been after. I don't even remember. Time's weird, but back in the day with Raw Underground, I thought it was an interesting concept, but I didn't really like the execution, especially taking the entire last hour of Raw and kind of turning it into that. Interesting idea. Give them props for trying something, but I don't think it really necessarily worked. But we've had a couple battleground underground matches in NXT now. One of them being Eddie Thorpe and Dominic Dijakovic, and or Dijak. Um, they and that was the match that actually kind of sold me on Underground. I thought they pulled that match off beautifully. I didn't think that that match was going to. I was not looking forward to it. I really wasn't. Before the match, but I feel like they used the lack of ropes, the poles, the lumberjacks, all very effectively, and that translated into Lola Vice's first underground match. Not that long ago. That was a great match as well. So I feel like one of the things that Bruce Kelly and I have brought up is maybe Underground becoming Lola Vice's match. Like, you think of Undertaker, Casket, Hell in a Cell. Maybe this might be something that Lola Vice brings out every once in a while if she kind of gets propelled up and is kind of a mainstay star. Um, it with her and Shayna Baszler kind of in this worked shoot fight, if you will. This is I have really high hopes for this match. I think there's a lot that they can do, in that underground setting, that you may not be able to pull off quite as effectively in a traditional match. And they can, with their background in MMA, might be able to make this look more like a shoot than an actual work. This is also the match that I was mentioning earlier in the night that Bruce brought up potentially even being in an octagon. Um, I kind of like, I'm not opposed to it, but I feel like trying to do a worked shoot fight in the octagon is going to expose the match completely, because
Mhm.
anybody that watches UFC or even is remotely close, familiar rather with UFC, you're used to seeing people's faces bashed in and blood and bruising and all of that. You're not going to get that out of this match. So that's one of the reasons I don't want to see it necessarily in an octagon, but I think the underground setting is perfect. You can kind of almost mimic what you would get inside the octagon in an MMA match. Kind of step out of that, pro wrestling bubble a little bit, and let these two women do what they do best, and that's kick each other's ass.
Is Shayna the baby face here?
She is.
What
Lola
do you think
Lola
about?
did a bit of a turn on Tuesday.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
I
Makes more
it
sense than Lola as a baby face, I think.
It does. I think it does.
Yeah.
And I'm always more of a fan of Shayna as a heel, but in this context, I think
Mhm.
this makes the most sense. Lola, even though they kind of had her working babyface for a while, I think she's gonna get over as a heel.
Mhm.
She just kind of has that I'm better than you type of an attitude. Maybe that's not even the best way to describe it, but I feel like just her personality, or the personality we see on TV anyway, lends itself to being being a heel. Um, it's going to be interesting watching Shayna try and get sympathy and stuff again. I am looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to this. Um, but like I said, I think it makes the most sense for Lola to be positioned as the heel here.
And you've got the NXT Underground match here. I don't think it's any coincidence that they're doing it at the UFC Apex in Las
No.
Vegas. I think that crossover made too much sense for them to pass up. So, I mean, the nice thing about it is you have this story that developed out of the last NXT Underground match. So it fits. I mean, it makes sense that they're doing it.
Yep, 100%, 100%.
The NXT Women's title will be on the line when Roxanne Perez defends against Jordan Grace. TNA Knockouts champion. Yes, that is correct. You talk about the Forbidden Door pay-per-view coming up for AEW, which we'll talk about in a few weeks, but here's a Forbidden Door example on NXT. So, Nate, we've seen in the past Mickey James, we've seen Jordan Grace, we've seen these TNA stars come and participate in the Royal Rumble, and it's a one-off. It's kind of fun to see somebody from somewhere else come in and wrestle, but there's no follow-up. Here, Jordan Grace not only coming and wrestling a singles match on NXT, but wrestling for the NXT Championship. And they did have an insight, even though Impact had taped their TV show before, they did have highlights of Jordan Grace's appearance on NXT on Impact TV Thursday night. So they did a little post production to include that, Tom Hannafin's commentary over it. So this is, we talked a little bit about this at the very beginning of the show, but certainly super intriguing. You know that Jordan Grace is going to want to, impress NXT officials, but also impress for the sake of TNA. I think, the TNA locker room knows that she's going to go to NXT and be on this PLE representing their company. And I think they're going to want her to put their best foot forward. And I think she's going to take that on her shoulders. She's going to do it. She's one of the best performers, man or woman, in TNA right now. So just really interesting. This is a step beyond what we've seen before with this TNA WWE relationship. And the reporting out there is that there's more to come. So what do you make about this? How surprising is this to you? Not that TNA and WWE are working together, because we've seen that before, but that they're working together on this level where a TNA wrestler is getting a title shot on a PLE.
I was personally, I was not expecting this whatsoever. I mean, the name floating around, and the name that we had talked about on PWT Talks NXT a couple weeks ago, for Roxanne Perez's opponent was Tegan Knox. I don't know if that was in the works and got scrapped, or if that was just a rumor that started floating around, but that's who we were talking about anyway. And it didn't really excite any of us. Nothing against Tegan Knox. I'm a little higher on Tegan than my counterparts on PWT Talks NXT, but it it just didn't really. I don't know. It didn't seem like it was going to be really a draw, if you will. So when Jordan Grace's music and her name shows up on the screen and everything, I was sitting right here and I stood up and I was like, holy crap, I was not expecting that. And it's very rare that like I get that surprised with wrestling
Yeah.
anymore, where I have that kind of just visceral reaction where I get to get out of my seat. Um, so for that, like the shock value alone, I think was great. Um, the fact that we do see her coming in now, as you said, singles match, but for a title that could potentially lead into additional storylines and things like that is, I feel like that's huge. As we kind of said at the top of the show, like you know, eh, WWE had never really historically wanted to work with other promotions. Here and there, yeah, they might send the odd person off to Japan or whatever, at least in the 90s and things like that. But something to this degree is virtually unheard of in modern day WWE, outside of the Rumble appearances. But again, that's a fun, hey, you showed up and part of the match. Um, Here this is I feel like this is huge. And if it goes well, which I think it will, as you said, Jordan Grace is one of the better performers they have right now. I'm not a huge TNA fan, so I haven't watched a whole lot, but since this past Tuesday, I pulled up a few, YouTube clips and things like that of her. And man, I'm more impressed by her every time I see her do something in the ring. So I think this is going to be an absolutely fantastic match. And again, if this all goes well, I think this is going to bode very well for more of these crossovers, whether it be on NXT TV or Impact. Sorry, TNA. It's yeah. I like I said, I think this is just a really good thing overall for really just pro wrestling in general.
I'm a huge Jordan Grace fan, and so having her be a part of this crossover to me is fantastic. Um, she is. I thought she was going to go potentially to WWE or AEW. Her contract with TNA had expired. I think maybe even close to a year ago now, maybe a little less than that. And she left TNA, did the goodbye, all that kind of stuff. And it seemed like she was on her way somewhere else. And then a couple months go by, nothing happens with her. She shows back up in TNA, re-signs with the company. So I think for me, that was a little disappointing because I wanted to see her on a bigger stage because I think she has just been a fantastic talent in TNA. And so this really gives her that platform that I feel like she deserves to really show her wares, even if she's not a contracted member of WWE or NXT, to really do her thing. And, there are a ton of wrestlers in NXT, Nate, you know this better than I do, who are not utilized on a week to week basis in
Mhm.
NXT, who, could go to TNA and who could be potentially big fish in a small pond and use that experience, come back to TNA or come back to NXT, and all of a sudden now they've got a spot.
Yeah, 100%. I think it'd be great for, anybody on the undercard that, it's a little underutilized. I'd need to pull up a roster, I think, if in order to kind of like pull out some names and things. Um, but that was something we brought up, this past Tuesday as well. I think it gives a lot of opportunity for underutilized talent, to actually go over and, like you said, be that big fish in a small pond, kind of be put in um, a higher spot on the card and kind of be able to kind of see how they perform there, get a little bit more under their belt in that capacity, and then like you said, bring it back to TNA. I did exactly what you did, bring it back to NXT, and and actually and perform. Charlie Dempsey, I was on just the Charlie Dempsey. He's one. Yeah, Bruce was really excited about potentially seeing like a Charlie Dempsey speedball match.
Mhm.
So I think that would be. I think any crossover like that, I think would be fantastic.
The only other match announced so far for NXT Battleground, and I say that in that particular way because I'll talk about that in a moment. But Nathan Frazier and Axiom against the OC NXT tag titles are on the line. I'm curious, Nate, as to your thoughts on the OC, another main roster act coming down to NXT to be maybe a little bit rejuvenated, at least being used on a week to week basis more than they would if they had stayed on Raw or SmackDown. There are talents that to me make a lot of sense coming down to NXT, Michin being one of them. Uh, I'm not sure that the OC makes a lot of sense in the context of NXT. We've seen but then again, you know what? Baron Corbin, I didn't really get him coming back down to NXT, even though he had the past there, and that really worked out. So I'm keeping an open mind for the OC coming down to NXT. But what do you think about that choice? We've seen wrestlers come from the main roster to NXT to kind of supplement the work that the NXT wrestlers do. Do you see the OC as fitting into what NXT does, or do you see them as a little more out of place than some of their contemporaries who have come from the main roster and maybe fit in a little better?
A little column A, little column B, to be honest. It does because it does seem a little weird, that they came down to NXT. They don't really have any of that history or anything like that. But um, at the same time, underutilized on the main roster. they've been defined down on the main roster. They broke up from, with AJ Styles, so the kind of there's that. Um, so bringing them down to NXT again, like you said, kind of that rejuvenation for the team, kind of build them back up. They're again, to use the analogy again, they're big fish in a small pond again. So I feel like it's kind of a way to make them feel like a bit more of a credible threat than they had been for years, or however long they've been back anyway. I forget how long it's been since they've been back, at least a year or so, in the WWE environment. Um, I personally think they're going to be the next NXT Tag Champs. Even before Axiom and Nathan Frazier won them, I thought they were going to win them, off of the family, the D'Angelo family. It to me, I thought it made sense at the time, and I still think it does make sense to put the titles on them. Not only do you finally have an actual tag team as champions, but you have a team that could feel like a credible threat and feel like it's going to be tough to defeat these guys for the titles. You know, eh, like, OTM, I think somebody, actually, I see OTM is on, brought OTM up a little while ago, and that's what I was saying. But, OTM, Chase University, there's only really a handful of legitimate, actual tag teams that haven't been just like Nathan Frazier and Axiom. They just found some common ground after having a bit of a friendly rivalry, and they formed a bit of a team. Um, but established tag teams are kind of, wow, has it really been 3 years? Okay. But established tag teams are a little lacking right now in NXT. So bringing the Good Brothers down, having them win the titles again, kind of establishes an actual tag team holding them. And I'm kind of hoping that because sorry, let me backtrack a little bit. Because I think a lot of people kind of forget that Carl Anderson had such a good run in New Japan. I know he was a champion over there, and there's a couple other things that a couple other accolades that he holds over there. Again, I don't follow New Japan, so I'm kind of just trying to parrot what Kelly was talking about. Um, but I think a lot of people wind up forgetting that, or aren't aware that he had a great singles run over there, and as a credible performer. So we know that they are, both Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson are capable of talking themselves up and kind of being that type of a more dominant player. And I think, because Axiom and Nathan Frazier, they haven't been wowing me as champions really. I As singles, I love them, but together as tag champs, it hasn't really felt uh, super organic. And they've been almost kind of doing some heelish things, like saying that, oh, the OC, we're never going to give them a shot at the titles, and then attacking the OC from behind this past week on NXT TV. It's just heelish when they're supposedly baby faces. Hasn't really worked, and I'd like to see the titles move on from Axiom and Nathan Frazier, and see what the OC can do with them for at least a month or two before they wind up dropping them to whoever they drop them to next.
Well, you'll notice that one match that we did not talk about yet is the NXT Championship match. Trick Williams so far does not have a match yet. And, you could say Noam Dar. Dar, I believe, was attacked on a recent episode of NXT TV. That may take him out of the picture. But Ethan Page made his NXT debut this past week on TV, as we talked about at the start of the show. Nate, is that the direction you expect them to go for Battleground? Do you expect them to hold off on that match? Where do you expect Trick Williams to fit into this Battleground card, if at all? I mean, is it possible that he doesn't defend the title on this show?
At this point, I'm not expecting it. It's certainly possible that they make that match on Tuesday, but I'm kind of thinking that they're building to Heatwave, which would be, I believe, is the next PLE for NXT. I think that's probably where they're building. Ethan Page, I think, is probably going to wind up coming out on Tuesday, introducing himself, to the WWE audience. And Trick, probably going to either attack him or have some words, but they'll have some sort of interaction. Um, I can't. I'm sure that they could make the match, but I feel like it's just too quick. Um, they'd need to tell me a really good story on Tuesday in order for me to be like, okay, you know what, I'm fully on board with this match happening this weekend. I would rather them have, if Trick Williams does show up at all, maybe in some sort of a backstage segment or even an in-ring segment with Ethan Page. But I think I would rather see them build this match to the next PLE, which, like I said, I believe is Heatwave.
Yeah, Steve said Ethan Page's title shot would be better for Heatwave, which is in Toronto on Money in the Bank weekend. Ethan Page himself, of course, from Canada. So it would be interesting to see the dueling reactions because, Trick is very over as a babyface. People love
Oh yeah.
chanting "Whoop that Trick," and are the Canadian fans going to forego that to cheer for Ethan Page? I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I know, as they always told us on commentary, it's Bizarro World up there.
Yes, yes. Despite the fact that, well, I'm not going to get into that. I could go on a long rant about that, but I'll save it for another time. That is the NXT Battleground show. Again, I'm not sure if we're going to go on the air after that. Is that Saturday or Sunday, Nate?
Um, oh God, now you put me on the spot. I can never remember because they keep flip flopping back, but I want to say it's on Sunday.
Okay. Well, we may go on the air. I'm
Sunday.
done with
It is
I'm
Sunday.
done. Okay, good. I'm done with school for the year, so I could stay up late to talk NXT. So tentatively, let's say after NXT Battleground, we'll go on the air with Wrestling Night in America. But definitely be sure to follow me on Twitter/X at Greg M Parks. I will give you the definite details later on this week once we get them all ironed out and I figure out if someone can co-host with me after Battleground, because that's just as important when it comes to timing the show, is making sure I have someone to co-host with me available. So I want to get to an email. Again, you can email us. I flashed it on the screen a little earlier. Anytime, WNIA livecast at gmail.com. We get to the emails each and every week, empty out the email. So this is from Zach in Texas, Nate, and this is a question for you, actually.
All
He
right.
says, I'm curious if Nate's feelings have changed regarding NXT's move to the abyss of the CW network in a few months. I don't watch NXT at all, but even I feel bad that they're being shuffled to a network nobody watches. Seriously. The highest viewed show on the network, according to the most recent ratings, is Penn and Teller's show at 623,000 viewers. Of the scripted shows on last year's schedule, just 3 have come back. It's a mess of a network. The only 2 shows on the network look like Scrabble and Trivial Pursuit, and that's just because I'm a game show nerd. This feels like NXT is about to be sent off to the CW and forgotten. I do wonder if the WWE's desire to have a network presence, even if it is on the CW, is maybe not great for the company overall, not great for the growth of NXT. I'm not sure there's a lot of growth potential on the CW, which, historically, admittedly, is a network that has drawn younger viewers. But I don't know if that's still the case these days, especially as younger viewers aren't really watching network TV, certainly not over the air the way that the ratings would be counted. So, if this was the CW of 10, 15 years ago, even 20 years ago, this may be a great move, but I do wonder if the cachet of being on network TV is not worth this move for WWE.
Yeah. It,
Setting aside the financials of it, of course.
oh no, yeah, no, definitely. So I do remember actually talking about this, and to be honest, I think I was still thinking of the CW from like 10, 15, 20 years ago, as kind of a bit of an upcoming and type of a network. And I was put in my place a little bit afterwards, from some DMs and things like that, after that particular episode. So I now, because like I'm one of those people that don't consume cable TV. I haven't actually had cable in God, maybe 10, 15 years at this point. Um, really ever since I moved out and I've been on my own. So, that's, yeah, it's been about, about 15 years or so. I never bothered getting cable. Um, so eh, it being a much, much smaller network than I had realized, um, I don't know. I really don't know if it's even really worth it. I understand probably from a business perspective, them wanting to be on network TV, people are flipping through the channels or something like that. They stumble across wrestling. Oh, what's this? But how many people actually flip through channels anymore? Like you
Yeah.
used to back in the '90s and before. Everybody's looking at their guide in the their Comcast box or whatever it is you've got, Direct TV, Dish, whatever. Or they're consuming content, online, whether it be from an online cable provider, YouTube, what have you. Um, eh, it I don't know. I mean, it almost for me, I feel like it almost makes sense to like put NXT on YouTube or put NXT on Netflix, with Raw or something like that. But with CW, it feels like a major downgrade from going from USA to CW. Not that they're getting absolutely killer ratings in NXT. Sorry, in USA. Um, but I think viewership is probably gonna wind up taking a bit of a hit after that switch.
Yeah, I think it's gonna give CW a nice floor anyway for what NXT can draw on, and I think it'll probably draw better than a lot of CW's programming that they have now. So it's gonna sort of raise their profile a little bit, but I do think for NXT, so I can understand why the CW would want to do it from their point of view.
Oh, yeah.
But from WWE's point of view for NXT, I'm not really sure how that's gonna grow an audience unless they know that the CW draws an audience that might be different than what NXT draws on cable, that draws on USA. If they really believe that this is a way that NXT and through NXT, WWE as a whole can draw new viewers. Maybe, I talked a little bit earlier about how the CW has historically drawn younger viewers, that a lot of teen focused shows. And I think people are already trying to read into what's airing on NXT programming as a tonal shift a little bit toward
Mhm.
that. Do you see NXT TV recently sort of preparing for their arrival on the CW by making it more drama heavy, soap opera like, anything like that, or do you see it more as business as usual?
Um, yeah, I'll be honest, I hadn't really thought about it. I think probably if I just going off the cuff here, probably more business as usual with the couple caveats. There seems to be, and this I think is really kind of across the board in WWE, but there seems to be a little bit less of a focus on staying PG. The fact that this past week on NXT TV, we had both Lola Vice and Sexy Red twerking and cameras right up all in there. I don't think we would have seen that in the NXT 2.0 era, or even 6 months ago, or however long it's been since they announced, the Netflix deal and all of that. I think I feel like it's almost 6 months at this point. Um, so, so yeah, there's definitely a bit of a shift, but yeah, actually, that's a good point. Bruce might not even be able to be watching NXT at the same time unless he has to get creative with some of the ways he's watching the show. Um,
I think I
but
heard you wink when you said that.
Yes, yes. Through absolutely legal means, of course.
Of course, of course.
Yes.
Of course. All right. We've got one more email to get to, and then I want to bring up the topic that Wade and I had just recorded about on the 12-minute hot take that'll be up for viewers very soon, if it's not up already. And this is an email from John. He's got a couple topics for us to talk about, a little off the beaten path away from NXT here. But he says the first topic is WWE purposely setting the bar low for the new bloodline. He says, I believe Wade Barrett literally used the phrase unrefined brutes to describe Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa in their tag match on SmackDown. And pretty much everything said about them on the shows recently seems to not necessarily be flattering in a certain context, other than them being savages who destroy anything in their path, which can be flattering. then they have a fairly competitive match with the Street Profits and politely leave afterwards. They could also be presented like this so the fans desperately want Roman back, which they do already with the We Want Roman chants. I'm taking a wait and see approach, but I'm leaning toward the new bloodline being presented this way purely as a juxtaposition to the original bloodline. It's also possible WWE may have low confidence in the group and their in-ring work, especially Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa, and Solo Sikoa's ability as a leader. His question, Nate, do you think this portrayal of the new bloodline is intentional to keep expectations low due to low confidence in them, or is it for storyline reasons? I definitely think it's storyline reasons. I don't think you would put people in your longest running, biggest storyline in the company if you did not have confidence in them. So I don't think that's it. One of the other talking points that the announcers have mentioned is that Tongaloa and Tama Tonga were um, too uncontrollable, too uh, outrageous to have been signed previously by WWE. That's why it's taken them. It's not because they're not talented. They wanted to make the point that the reason that they haven't been seen in WWE before this is they were too out of control. And management felt like they could not control them. So now Solo Sikoa brings them in, and they're showing that um, behavior that the announcers warned us about on TV. So I definitely think it's more storyline than it is to cover any shortcomings that WWE feels Tonga Loa or Tama Tonga have. I saw you nodding, Nate. The beauty of video, so I take it you
Yes.
agree.
Yeah, no, 100%. I don't think I could have said it better myself, to be completely honest. Yeah, I feel like it's completely story. They really would not have. I don't think they would have signed them in the first place, but they wouldn't put them in like a super high profile spot if they didn't have confidence in them. It feels like it's all story. We had that, Paul Heyman kind of losing control. Nobody, he blew up in the ring. Why does nobody listen to me? I feel like it's all story. And then once we do get Roman back, and actually now that I think of it, I don't remember if, because I know it was an extended hiatus, but maybe we see him show up at SummerSlam or something like that. Um, and, kind of try to rein in the bloodline. That's what I feel like they're building towards is, Roman coming back and being like, whoa, why are
Yeah.
you guys running wild? No, no, no. We need to whip you into shape, or something along those lines. But I definitely don't think it's a confidence thing. I will almost, I'd say 99.99% go, this is story. The announcer's job is to tell us verbally tell us the story that can't be told, without words, I guess, in the ring. So what they're saying is probably deliberate. Maybe to put that question of confidence in your head, especially kind of a meta way for, fans like us that kind of analyze and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely storyline.
And John even mentioned, that juxtaposition of how the Roman Reigns led bloodline did things versus how the Solo Sikoa led bloodline does things. Roman was very calculated. He was 95% of the time very calm. You'd see him in the backstage segments directing someone to do something. And here now you have Tonga Loa and Tama Tonga acting more on emotion, seemingly, than and Solo Sikoa to a lesser extent, acting more on emotion. So I do think that juxtaposition between here's how Roman Reigns did things as the leader of the bloodline, here's how Solo Sikoa is doing things as leader of the bloodline, they are very different. I think that's an important difference to make if your eventuality is getting to a Roman Reigns faction versus a Solo Sikoa faction, is drawing those distinctions between the two.
Yeah, 100%. So I could definitely see Roman coming back and even recruiting Jay and Jimmy again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly in the realm of possibility.
So, John's second topic for us is about the Liv Morgan, Dominic Mysterio, Rhea Ripley love triangle that we've fallen into as of Raw. John says, I didn't like the finish to the steel cage match on Raw, but I do like Liv Morgan and Dominic as a duo going forward. I also generally don't like love triangles the way WWE tends to do them, but I'm not against them being done well. And I think this one has a lot of potential to be done well. So I have laid out a path for this going forward, and you can give me your thoughts. John says, first, Dominic continues looking like a complete idiot for a few more weeks and keeps claiming to have spoken to Rhea and tells Judgment Day he and Rhea are okay. Meanwhile, Liv is winning matches and tries to stir up trouble with Dominic and Rhea by claiming she and Dom were in cahoots the whole time, hence those secret meetings of them caught on camera over recent weeks. Judgment Day questions Dom on this, and he vehemently denies Liv's claims. In the following weeks, we see backstage footage revealed by someone anonymous of Liv and Dom seemingly inconspicuously going into a secret room and leaving 20 minutes later with Dominic's hair noticeably ruffled and a smile on his face. What's going on? Dom is asked about this and denies the accusations and simply says he was in a fight with an anonymous wrestler in that room. And that explains his demeanor when he left. He seems quite confident, but you can see the doubt in his eyes. Soon after this, Rhea is due to return, and the whole night leading to her showing up is focusing on a nervous Dominic waiting in the parking lot and looking nervous. Rhea's music hits and the fans explode in excitement. Liv interrupts Rhea's return promo in the ring and says she and Dom have gotten to know one another while she's been gone. Dom then runs out to the ring and looks like he's trying to silence Liv, but they just passionately kiss in front of Rhea. Rhea does look visibly upset for a moment, but she shoves Liv aside with incredible intensity and starts angrily talking to Dom and asking what the hell is going on. Dom still tries to play innocent and blames Liv, but Rhea lays Dom out with a riptide, but still looks conflicted as she leaves the ring because she trusted Dom. Alternatively, you could have Liv brutally attack Rhea from behind with a steel chair in this segment while she's focused on Dominic. Rhea is firmly a babyface and pins Liv clean in their first match to regain the women's championship, and she also gets further revenge on Dom. Liv also keeps winning matches in the meantime to give her further credibility. Question, what are your thoughts on this path as a possible way forward in this feud? Well, John has clearly taken his time laying out this
Yeah.
scenario. I
We
think
want to talk about dedication earlier. That's some dedication right there.
I think ultimately the story has to be Rhea being in a position of power. I don't think it can be Dom turns on Rhea and sides with Liv. I don't think it can be that easy. I think Dominic is a scumbag who fans want to see Rhea dump at this point, right? So it shouldn't be Dom in a position of power by kissing Liv in front of Rhea, even if Rhea gets her revenge. I mean, Rhea should be the one who dumps Dominic, I think, because that fits her character, puts her in her position of power, gets her babyface run off on the right foot. I think we all decry those baby faces who turn babyface because they were beaten down by their heel counterparts, right? And that's not the way to turn babyface. And I draw some distinctions between what I fear happens with Rhea and those type of scenarios. So Nate, what do you think about what John laid out? What might you do differently than John's scenario? How would you like to see this play out with Dom, Liv, and Rhea?
So, I mean, I don't necessarily dislike what John laid out. I mean, it's interesting and I feel like could certainly be entertaining if done correctly. But I also I kind of feel pretty strongly towards what you're saying. Like, if this was to play out in that way, Rhea comes back and then she's either like you said, either beaten down or we see Dom and Liv kind of kissing and turning on her or whatever. It I don't know, I feel like that defines Rhea down. Like Rhea wouldn't stand for that. Like as it's happening, you'd expect Rhea to like if, as they're kissing, you'd expect Rhea to just attack both of them or something. Um, so uh, I don't necessarily see them going in that direction unless they had an incredible story to tell us that really made it believable. For me, I obviously I feel like Liv winning the title is building to a match with Rhea when she comes back. I can't imagine Liv losing the belt unless there's some sort of an injury or something like that she sustains. So God forbid. But I can't see her losing the title before Rhea comes back. The story is too the story they're telling us is kind of too hot. And I mean Rhea, Dom, they were the hottest thing on TV for a while.
I
Um,
think that's one thing. No matter what direction you believe this love triangle should take, I think almost everybody will agree that Rhea should come back and beat Liv Morgan for the title.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I can't I mean, unless that match, when they face, finally face off in a singles match for the title, because it better be a singles match for the title. Um, unless Dominic that's when he turns on Rhea and Rhea doesn't, she doesn't win for whatever reason, because of of that turn. I can't imagine Rhea not winning the title back. And again, I don't think that would be the direction they'd want to go anyway. Having Dominic kind of side with Liv in that way. Um, I think she needs to come back strong. She needs to come back, and I'm sure she's probably going to question Dom, on a few things, and especially kind of those little hidden meetings with Liv. But I can't imagine that they would go any direction than whatever is going to make Rhea look the the strongest.
Last topic from John. It's about Chad Gable and his potential future as a main event level star. John says, I feel Gable has been very impressive lately as an actor, and his presentation has been very good. He comes across as a serious person, and his motivations are pretty clear to win the Intercontinental Championship. And this is all heading to a singles match against Sami Zayn. This is one of those angles that could propel him to an even higher level when the time is right. I personally think he has the tools to be in the main event picture, especially since Raw has the secondary world championship, and the person holding it right now isn't necessarily a proven main event star himself. Gable is overall better in the ring than Damian Priest and has been getting better with his character work. Although this isn't to criticize Priest, who has been good himself, and his facial expressions and body language have been really good recently. His question is, what do you think is Chad Gable's highest ceiling? And if he wins the world championship within the next year based on his current trajectory, do you think you could take him seriously in that role? Keep up the great work. Thank you, John, as always. Um, it's still hard for me to see Chad Gable as a world title level wrestler.
Yeah.
I certainly think being a fixture in the IC title or US title level is not a bad thing. Certainly, he's impressed with his character work, with his heel run here, laying it on really thick. It's been a lot of fun to see him really chew the scenery with Akira Tozawa and Otis and Maxine. So I think this is one of those things where it's better to have Triple H taking over, because I think Gable's getting more of an opportunity with Triple H than he would have, a more three-dimensional character anyway than he would have with Vince McMahon. So Nate, I'm curious your thoughts on Chad Gable. Certainly really good in the ring, certainly really good character work. It wouldn't shock me if he got a world title opportunity at some point, but the size working against him is a pretty major drawback, even for someone as open-minded on that as Triple H, or certainly more open-minded than his predecessor. But what do you think about Chad Gable, and what's his ceiling?
So I'm a big fan of Chad Gable. I mean, going all the way back to the American Alpha days back in NXT with him and Jason Jordan. I feel like Gable has always been an incredible performer.
Isn't that a big
Uh,
what if? Jason Jordan, if he had stayed
I
healthy. Wow.
know. I know. It really is. Like I'm glad he's thriving in the role that he's in, but man, I
Yep.
feel like he could have been although that Kurt Angle storyline might have been a nail in a coffin for him, but that's another story.
I think he could have recovered from that.
Yeah.
He has the talent to be resilient.
No, 100%, 100%. But no, like I said, I mean, you hit the nail on the head as far as I'm concerned. I feel like Chad Gable, he's got the ability in the ring. His character work as of late's been fantastic. I mean, getting right up in the face of Otis, and back in King and Queen of the Ring, before Otis, clotheslined him by accident. Just everything that he's been doing has been uh, just like a sniveling heel would do, like you want to see him get his comeuppance and all of that. Um, I I do have a hard time seeing him as world champ. I'd love to see it because again, I'm really a big fan of his body of work. But it's hard for me to take that, I guess, kind of take that seriously. Um, given how he's been, booked over the years. If he never went into, the whole shoosh thing and kind of became a bit of a comedic wrestler, Shorty G, and all of that, maybe like if he had that, as you said, what if, with American Alpha, and he had that same kind of American Alpha run where you thought of him as a legit grappler, wrestler. I feel like maybe you could have built him up from there to be a credible opponent for, world champion. Maybe not the title holder, but I feel like that would seem more credible to me. Now, I feel like they're trying to, uh, I guess, I don't want to say erase the past because you can't really erase the past, but kind of change his character in a way where you forget all of the short EG stuff, the shoe stuff, and that. Um, but at this point, I don't want to say the damage has been done because I feel like you probably can always undo damage, but I feel like it's going to be really hard for them, both WWE as a whole, Triple H, and Chad Gable to really tell a story effectively that's going to get the crowd behind him, and whether it's cheering for him or booing him, but get behind him to then become a world champion and make it seem believable, credible, and not just have people roll their eyes like, "What? Chad Gable's now the champ?"
Yeah.
Um, like you said, IC title, US title scene being kind of the top of that title picture, I think is perfect for him. Not everybody can be at the top of the card. You need people, up and down the card to flesh out a good show. So I don't think it's a bad position for him to be in whatsoever. But outside of maybe a token world title match here and there, I don't see the ceiling much higher for him than that.
Agreed. One last thing before we get out of here, Nate, provided you are caught up on AEW.
I am not.
Okay. Um, what's your level of knowledge about what's going on?
Um, uh, I wouldn't say super great, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Not to throw a
d- uh,
monkey wrench in your plans or anything, but
I okay.
the
I
thing
won't
that
put.
sucks is like when I first joined the show was actually the same day that AEW went live their very first time when I first joined PWT Talks NXT, and they were all both on Wednesdays. So I never got in a routine of watching AEW, and I
Yeah.
still haven't got that. So outside of watching a pay-per-view here and there with my friends, I don't really keep up with it a lot. I know
Okay.
MJF just came back and Adam Cole.
Yeah.
There's a few things there, but um, I I don't know enough to intelligently speak on it. Let's put it that
Okay,
way.
no worries. I'm not going to put you on the spot then. What I will say is the 12-minute hot take that I recorded with PW Torch editor Wade Keller right before we went on the air here, that will be appearing in the PW Torch YouTube feed at some point, was on Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland and the decision to have that match for the world title at Forbidden Door before All In. I know a lot of people were expecting Swerve versus Ospreay at All In. Could still take place, but it'll take place first at Forbidden Door, and whether or not that is a good idea. So Wade and I talked about that for about 12 minutes. We hit the mark pretty well on that 12-minute hot take that'll be appearing in your YouTube feed for PW Torch. Nate, thank you so much for joining me to break down NXT Battleground here on Wrestling Night in America. Before you go, as always, go ahead and plug your stuff, and this time we'll have graphics for you.
All right. So, Nate Lindberg, you can check out the things that I do at natelindberg.com. Follow me at Nate Lindberg on X, if you will. Still weird calling it X. It's Twitter. But I also am one of the hosts of PWT Talks NXT. We go live approximately about 10 minutes or so after NXT gets off the air. And exactly in this format, we're now in the video format. Just feel free to throw things in the chat, or you can always email us at pwtorchnxt@gmail.com to be part of the show.
Oh, I've got that one too, right there. And we have a comment for you, Nate. Since look, I mean, Swerve Strickland, he's a former WWE, former NXT guy. So this mysterious pro wrestling torch has asked the
Hmm.
question: what do you think about Swerve ascending to AEW World Title status? So we saw Swerve in NXT. We saw him briefly on the main roster. what do you think about Swerve as AEW champion? Is that something you saw when he was in NXT? The talent, the potential to lead a company like AEW, as a world champion? Does it surprise you that he's gotten that opportunity? What's your take overall on Swerve as AEW champion?
I'm completely on board with it, to be honest with you. I thought Swerve had like just all the upside in the world in NXT. His main roster debut in WWE was, with Hit Row was, I mean, it was okay, but I felt like Hit Row, they never really hit their mark and they hit their stride, before they got released anyway. Now they're back and without, um, or actually no, I think they were back and now they're gone again. Now that I think about it, um, but yeah, Swerve, he was the one in that group, and even before his NXT run, on the Indies and things, um, he like he had all the charisma in the world. He's phenomenal in the ring. I was really hoping to see him as NXT champion at one point. I know we back in the PWT archives, I know we talked quite a bit about that. When he was still down in NXT, NXT North American champion. I think he even had a shot for the belt, if I'm not mistaken, at one point for the NXT title. Um, you know, I I can't say that I would have necessarily seen him as carrying a company like that, but I think for me, it's not that I don't think he had the ability to do it or couldn't actually be a credible champion. I just thought with in WWE, especially under Vince at the time, I didn't ever really see him being able to break through that quote unquote glass ceiling, if you will, to become world champion. I kind of figured he might be, in the tag scene or IC US title picture if on the main roster. But yeah, I'm really happy to see him in the position that he's in. And again, I'm not really following AEW, so I couldn't tell you how the run's going. But as a fan of Swerve anyway, I feel like I'm glad to see him in the position, and I'm hoping he's doing the title well.
Yeah, I love Swerve in this role. I'm glad they elevated him to the world title. It's just one of those things of unfortunate timing where Osprey is just so hot and he seems like the guy to run with the ball in AEW, and Swerve is just a victim of bad timing at this point. And there's that sometimes that's what the wrestling business is all about, and it's nobody's fault. But he's probably going to end up getting a shorter title reign that maybe some would argue he deserves, or that he would have gotten had it not been for Will Ospreay A signing with AEW and B getting the kind of reactions he's getting from the crowds to the point that you seriously have to put the title on him um, quickly before his star burns out. So, Nate, thank you so much for joining us. We'll look forward to you on PWT Talks NXT next Tuesday, right here on the PW Torch YouTube page.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure, man.
All right. And don't forget, you can email us, wnialivecast@gmail.com. You can tune in every Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, here on pwtorchdailycast.com and the PW Torch YouTube page. Again, I believe next week will be going on after NXT Battleground. Not 100% sure on that. So follow me on Twitter/X @Greg M. Parks for more, because we'll talk to you next Sunday. If it's Sunday, it's Wrestling Night in America.